Hello, everyone. How's it going? Happy New Year to everyone who's listening. This is back finally. It's been a while for the M3 podcast here. Renamed it a little bit. It's still M3, but I called it Mega Multimedia Productions. I changed the name a little bit to make it a little bit easier for people to find. Hopefully, that will still be all good. Still always talking about movies, games, TV shows, anime, comics, all things kind of in the media, all things fun. Mostly tends to mostly be a lot of Marvel content, but that's just because it's always big. I'm Davis. I'm the main, I guess, producer, podcast person. I don't know how you want to say it, but I come back and forth between a few people each week and kind of elaborate and we chit chat about what's going on in the world. This episode we're going to be mostly talking about Spider-Man: No Way Home, or yeah, No Way Home. There's all the names are so bizarre sometimes. Chit chatting about that. And so it will be a spoiler, but it's now been almost a month since it's been out. So and hopefully if people are listening, they've already seen it. And then we'll be talking about some of the best movies of 2021, TV shows, everything, and if we even get the chance to, but it will probably relate mostly due to Marvel content again. But it's always fun. So with me today is a friend of mine, Neil Chace. He is a local actor, writer, producer, director with his productions in Brimstone. Well, I guess him and other people at Brimstone Productions. They are a local agency, kind of. How would you describe Brimstone?
Yeah, it's Brimstone Pictures. There is a Brimstone Productions, but I think those guys are out of the states. So not to confuse people with the two brands. Um, yeah, it's Brimstone Pictures. So it's myself, David Haycock, and Preston Owasiuk. The three of us kind of banded together and formed this little company to, yeah, make some pretty cool little genre style content for the Edmonton slash Alberta region. I think we're trying to do something a little bit different, something to sort of set the city apart from your typical low budget horror or low budget slasher, I should say, and Christmas movies. That seems to be sort of the two big things that get filmed around here, and we're just kind of trying to break that mold and put something out there that's relatively high quality at a budget.
Yeah.
So that's the
Um,
idea.
Well, well, I guess you are. I was kind of here a little bit with it, but you're working on a production right now. But we're not going to go too much detail because you don't want to elaborate that. But it's basically one of the feature films that's happening in Edmonton. That, and as Preston told me, he was like he wants to kind of break the mold to try to help let bigger agencies know that Edmonton can do it, right?
That's
Uh,
that's the plan. Yeah, yeah. It's a script that I wrote. It it got some attention from the Nickel Fellowships, which is put on by the Academy of Motion Pictures and Sciences. So they had some really nice things to say about it. It placed in their competition, and I thought, okay, if we're going to do something that's primarily single location, that's low budget, small cast, small crew. This is kind of the one to come out of the gate with, and that was the plan, and it's been going really well so far. I couldn't be happier with the results. We're still in filming right now in production. We kind of took a hiatus over the Christmas holidays. I think we're looking to resume probably end of January, maybe beginning of February, how depending on how everything sort of
COVID.
lines up. Yeah, there's so many different factors. I mean, that's obviously the elephant in the room, for any production moving forward. Luckily, though, the stuff we have left requires pretty much like one or two actors in a single location indoors. So it's not a big one. It's not a big any big group scenes or anything like this. Thank goodness. That was never the intent of this film. So when I wrote it, I wanted it to be something that we could film locally, that we could film very contained. And that was before, COVID even reared its ugly head. So that had really nothing. It wasn't driven by that. It was just more driven from logistics and economics standpoint. And I always thought of it as a really great challenge to be able to write a single location film, feature film, because to make some of if you're gonna pull it off well, the story has to be really tight. Because how do you keep somebody's interest in a single place?
No car chases 90, or anything.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's some really great films out there that manage to do that. I think of just off the top of my head, stuff like Buried, for example, with Ryan Reynolds. The entire thing takes place in a box. I mean, that was phenomenal. Then there's something like Burke with Tom Hardy. He did I think, wasn't it Burke? I think it was, where he basically acts the entire thing in his car on a drive from one English city to another. Again, amazing performance, and great story, and that's what it comes down to is sort of the character developments, I think, and you want to have some really great dialogue, you want to have some really great character development, and a really intriguing and interesting story at the heart of it that makes viewers want to stay tuned in and find out, like, where is this going, and how does it end? So that's the idea.
Yeah, nice. Well, we can't really elaborate too much. Well, maybe later when it's actually being actually coming out, we'll talk and elaborate a little bit more on that.
I look forward to it.
Yeah, that'd be fun. So that's you and your stuff. Let's get to what people want to actually hear and talk about. So I'm assuming, if we're talking, you saw Spider-Man, correct?
I have.
When did you see it?
Just a few weeks ago. It was over the holidays here, and with the weather being what it is, it seemed like a perfect time to spend it in a nice warm theater as opposed to being outside in the minus whatever billion it was.
Yeah.
At least that's how it felt like. So yeah, I thought it was a great film. I really, really enjoyed it. I think it's the best Marvel film in easily the last couple of years.
Oh yeah, that's in the last couple of years. What's a couple of years to you?
The last film, the Marvel film that I enjoyed as much as this one would have probably been Endgame.
Endgame, yeah, that's what a lot of people are saying, is that it's at the same level as Infinity War and Endgame, because it's such a big like franchise continuation, right? Just like Endgame, everything was in comparison to Shang-Chi was good, but it wasn't as good. Black Widow was not as good as we thought it was good, and we talked about that before as well. But Black Widow was like, as you and I both said, it was like it should have came out in like 2010, 2012, whatever. But and it would have made more sense. But yeah, no, and so exactly, Spider-Man's my favorite hero. Spider-Man's most people's favorite superhero. You either have Batman fans or you have Spider-Man fans, basically, and yeah, I saw.
It's funny you say that. I'm honestly more what you've got right behind you there, Captain
America.
That's my boy. Yeah, I found I used to be, or I still am, Superman's my number one hero, but Captain America is right up there with him as far as I'm concerned. That started really with the Civil War comic books, and then the movie adaptations. When Chris Evans took over that role, man, I thought he was just cast so perfectly.
Yeah,
people talk about Robert Downey Jr. being perfect, which he was, but Chris Evans, man, that guy embodies that role 100%.
Well, the top three: Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., and Hugh Jackman. Like, there's three people. Yeah. The only thing with Hugh Jackman is that he's too big in comparison to, because Wolverine's only like 5'4" or something like that in the comics. Yeah. So that's the only thing that's negative about Hugh Jackman as Wolverine. But those are the top three people that are like, yeah, like no one else can, and it doesn't look like Marvel's gonna be trying to like recast or do anything like that. So like at least as of right now, with so many things happening with the MCU, that's what I noticed with a lot of things in the MCU is that they are making continuations instead of trying to re-bring in things. So they're having Iron Heart, they're having Soldier, what's his name? Soldier? No, not Soldier Boy. That's completely different. The young Captain America. I don't remember his name. In Falcon and the Winter Soldier, they introduced him. They introduced like so many other characters, so they're still continuing on the franchises, right?
Yeah, and I think it's honestly, I think that's a smart move because I think we live in a time where if a franchise becomes really successful, people identify the actor with the role, and it's hard to sort of disconnect yourself from it. I think it's a lot easier to do with a supporting character or somebody who's not as well known. Like famously, when they recast, Rhodey in Iron Man 2, I think they could get away with that because he was a supporting character. And it's not like they did it with Robert Downey Jr. I think there would have been a much more of a backlash had that happened.
And
it's that bringing it into the Spider-Man conversation, I think is interesting. This entire topic because it's kind of what's cool about it is they did exactly that 3 times over with Spider-Man. Right?
Exactly.
And then in this film, what's amazing is they actually bring all those worlds together, which is just phenomenal. I loved how they did that.
And this one, because I've had complaints, and I kind of for myself especially as well, is that both Spider-Man: Homecoming and Far From Home were good Spider-Man movies, but they were more MCU movies, like if you know what I mean, in comparison to Andrew Garfield or Tobey Maguire, where they were just good Spider-Man movies because they didn't have like a whole world to build off of, right? Where this one, it actually is. It's other than like the other little nods to other characters and having Doctor Strange obviously in it as well, but that's the kind of like the only main parallel. It's still just a Spider-Man movie, like a Spider-Man, Spider-Man fighting all the like the villains and everyone that are like known as Sinister Six, the Kraven the Hunter. Well, I guess, but tease Kraven the Hunter, I guess, at the end. But other known villains, and the fact that there's like Venom. They like when they first introduced Venom into the Sony verse, it was like, why? How are they going to do this without Spider-Man? And now they're kind of teasing like bringing Venom in. It's like it's done in such a way where like it's a Spider-Man movie. It's such a Spider-Man movie, but it's still subtle hints to the MCU.
Yeah, exactly. It's part of that overall world, but they didn't have to dip into that world, which I think, and in this case, in this film, I thought it worked really well. Like to contrast, for example, you could look at say Iron Man 3, or you could look at Captain America: Winter Soldier, and there would be these times when you sort of like you're seeing these sort of world-shattering events happening, and you're wondering, well, where's the other Avengers while all this is happening? It's like it's so big. What's going on?
Thor: Dark World was a big
yeah. There you go. That's a perfect example, right? And so you're wondering where are all these other heroes in this time of crisis? And I think what was cool about the Spider-Man film is that it is still kind of localized in its scope. It wasn't like some world-shattering event, even though the scale of it sort of grows and grows and grows and becomes this thing. It's like the entire universe is at stake, and yet it's still localized to just like New York. And specifically at the end, the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought that was really well done.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking there too, because like bringing in and having Tom Holland's Peter Parker's like his friends still there and making it about him and his story and everything, and especially having Aunt May being like an integral part, and her death in this movie was like the heart-wrenching moment and everything, and we never got anything like that in any of the previous Tom Holland's Spider-Man movies, right? And like
they were much lighter, sort of. It felt lighter, right? It didn't feel as heavy as the Tobey Maguire or the Andrew Garfield, where there was a lot more darker content,
Hmm.
right? But this one definitely sort of, became a lot heavier.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know about you, but as soon as she said those words, I was like, "Uh-oh, she's done for."
Yeah.
And
Oh, yeah. Of
sure
course.
enough, it's like a minute later. I'm like, "Oops."
Yeah. Well, yeah. There's no coming back to life after those words are said. The but the only thing, because like I guess Uncle Ben, or I guess in this case Aunt May dying,
Yeah.
is the same thing as Bruce Wayne's parents dying in the alleyway or whatever. Like it's something that you can't retcon, that can't be back. Like maybe in comics there probably are, more about the actual comics than I do, but there probably are worlds where they're not actually dead, or they come back to life or some random thing. But like
Mhm.
that's the thing that grounds them into making let them to do what they do, right? And that's why I think
Yeah,
why, yeah.
yeah. That's kind of the idea behind the characters, right? Is um, this idea that they suffer some form of tragedy that then sets them on this path, and it's always what separates the hero from the villain. The hero will decide to channel that pain, that grief, even that anger, in a positive way, and try to affect good out of the tragedy that they've suffered. Whereas the villain will give in to all of those negative feelings and will lash out at the world and will
Hmm.
say, you took from me, now I'm going to take from you.
Hmm.
So that at its heart, really, that's really what defines the hero versus
and
villain.
and
In a situation like that.
but the thing I love about, like, I guess all three of the Spider-Man, like in the individual movies, is that they even elaborate on this in this one, is that they each kind of still have that human aspect of like, case this bad thing happened and they want to actually seek revenge or whatever, like Tobey
Mhm.
Maguire with Uncle Ben. Same thing with I think it was the same thing. Yeah, same thing even with Andrew Garfield with in Amazing Spider-Man. Both of them have that like
Yeah,
trying to go after the robber moment and being like full vengeful, and then you
right.
see like that the comeback into heroism.
Yeah, and that's really what defines a hero, right? Is the at that moment of truth, do you give in to your flaws or do you overcome them? And I found it interesting how in this one, though, it wasn't so much that Tom Holland Spider-Man overcame that moment. It took Tobey Maguire's sacrifice for him to realize it.
Hmm.
That was really really cool. How they, it's almost like out of the three of them, each one had a different core strength, right? That
Hmm.
that the others then were, or even an internal flaw that the others would help them overcome. I thought it was wonderful how they gave Andrew Garfield that moment of saving MJ,
Yeah.
to make up for not being able to do it with Gwen,
Hmm.
right? And it was such a poignant moment. I thought like he acted like Andrew Garfield as an actor acted so beautifully in that moment. It was
Hmm.
like I was like, oh man, I'm feeling misty here.
Yeah. Well, that's the brought up so many things online of like, get Andrew Garfield an Amazing Spider-Man 3, like get him into the role again, because a lot of people are like liking him in the role. And at first I didn't really like him. I liked him as a Spider-Man, but not so much as a Peter Parker in the first Amazing Spider-Man movie.
Yeah,
He was
I
too,
felt the same way.
yeah, he was too like skater boy and too cool or whatever, in
Yep.
my opinion. But
Yes.
yeah, a lot of
Agreed.
people, yeah, show that yeah, Andrew Garfield, he can be a strong actor, he's really good at the emotional points and moments, right?
Yeah. I think
Uh,
he's gotten better over the years. It's one of those things where experience, right? Because he's definitely not the same kid he was when he played those Spider-Man films. Whatever it is, 10, 15 years ago now.
mhm.
Um, so I think he's grown a lot as an actor, and it really showed in this performance. I thought it was a wonderful performance.
Mhm. So what did you think about like the introduction to the villains, like how they each showed up, and like especially Doc Ock and the. Okay, like sorry, I'm gonna answer this question first before I jump back to you, because
Sure.
the Doc Ock showing up on the bridge, and then that holy shit moment when he gets the nanotech was like, holy shit, how is that gonna, like, I was literally worried, and then you notice that, okay, let me just control it, and he's like, what the fuck is going on here? And he has his mask
Yeah.
off and everything, like, that was both scary and then went to funny, like, instantly. That was so well played.
Yeah, I think that's something the MCU does really well in general. Is they're able to balance the action and the serious moments with the comedy. I find MCU does that extremely well. Does it way better than maybe the standalone Sony franchises or the Fox universe or even DC universe, which all try to pepper their stuff with humor. But I think Marvel sort of found a really good formula for it. Because I think they understand the storytelling technique of when to use humor.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it should be used as a kind of pressure relief valve. So you want to ramp up tension, ramp up tension, ramp up tension, really get your audience, to the point where they're almost jumping out of their seats in anticipation of something happening, and then you kind of swerve them with a joke or a gag, and it immediately sets your audience at ease. It's a technique you see used a lot in horror films, in well written horror films.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something that just eases off the pressure enough on the audience that they can just settle down, and then now you can coast into that next big moment,
Mm-hmm.
right? And each time you're ramping it up a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. If you notice, even in the climax of the film, there was a good amount of horror, a good amount of comedy. Sorry, not horror.
Yeah.
A good amount of comedy going on, especially between the three Spider-Men, right?
Mm-hmm.
Their dialogue was fantastic.
Well, because they
So
kind of
that
has to be with them. Spider-Man's meant to be quippy and jokey and stuff like that. So all three of them have to have
right.
that funny, attitude, right?
Yeah, but what was cool is it was in different ways.
Yeah.
Right? Like each one approaches the character in a completely different way, and I thought that was really cool. If you contrast that, for example, with Batman, um, I think you'd have a much harder time pulling this off with a Batman franchise. Say, for example, if you got Michael Keaton together with Christian Bale together with Ben Affleck, and whichever others, Val Kilmer and George Clooney, if you want to throw them in the mix as well.
Mm-hmm.
At their hearts, I find their Bruce Waynes are quite different as characters, but their Batman personas tend to be kind of the same note.
Mm-hmm.
It's the big gruff guy who's just kind of
Batman. Yeah.
Like, I'm Batman.
Yeah.
And it's like that's kind of it, right? That's the note.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't think they would be able to pull it off as well had that scene been like, say, 3 Batman
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to 3 Spider-Man. So, but you never know.
Yeah. That's because in DC it's more the Flash that does multiverse stuff than
Mhm.
and as the known character that does. There are other characters that do, but and he has the same kind of like jokiness attitude as Spider-Man, but still not the same. Like as you just said,
Yeah.
even if we did Grant Gustin and Ezra Miller, I think that's
Mhm.
that have done the live actions, right? They could, because I like Grant Gustin as Flash. I like him better than Ezra Miller.
Yeah.
It could work, but again, still not the same, because I think especially like Tobey Maguire, he shows like how I'm glad they didn't like try to de-age him or anything like that. Like they kept him
Yes.
they showed the fact that he's been doing this and he's still Spider-Man since 2005 or whatever, and so he shows his experience, kind of like Peter B. Parker in Into the Spider-Verse, right?
Yeah, he reminded me a lot of that character actually. It was really interesting. But I agree. I'm so glad they didn't try to de-age either one of them and show them as guys who've been doing this for a while now, like
Mm-hmm.
a really long time. And I love that even even though they both have, the two older Spider-Men, even though they both have a wealth of experience under their belts, there was still a stark personality difference where the Andrew Garfield one didn't come across as so self-assured as Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man.
Mhm.
And I think the big reason for that is, again, it harkens back to that moment where Gwen dies, and I think it's like they sort of went out of their way to show that he has this weight on his shoulders ever since that moment. I think he's always trying to step out of that shadow. And it was kind of neat to see that this movie was the catalyst for that happening.
Mhm.
And like you say, I've seen the calls as well to say, like, yeah, give him a third movie now, and let's see where that character goes now,
As he
after this
redeemed himself. Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Right, and so sort of like what great heights can he accomplish now, or can he reach now? And that would be very cool to see.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah. So okay. So no. Sorry. Going back to what was talking about what was your initial thoughts on how the villains, everyone kind of showed up.
I thought it was well done, especially with the sort of the mechanics of the story, right? The MacGuffin being, it's only these people who know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man who are getting pulled into this universe. I found it interesting that they only pulled in the villains
Yeah.
when there are certain heroes and sort of other side characters like other Aunt Mays or other you know sort of friends or colleagues of Peter's who know his secret as well,
Hmm.
but they didn't show up. And I can understand it. It's sort of like too many eggs in one basket,
Yeah.
maybe at that point, right? It might dilute the story.
Yeah.
Um,
Or else you'd have to
but
include like
but
all the random people on the train in the first Spider-Man.
right,
Very like that
there you
scene,
go.
right?
Yeah,
Well, I guess they don't get
yeah.
his.
There you go.
Yeah, do they get his name? That's probably they see him without his mask, but I don't they get his name, so that
Yeah,
might
I
be
don't think they'd
why.
actually know who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. But yeah, but it's like the other MJs, for example, the other MJ, like Kristen Dunst's character,
Hmm.
like she obviously knows who he is. So would it have been maybe interesting to have her in the movie as well? I don't know, possibly. It's like it becomes a matter of like how do you work those characters in?
Hmm.
I think there was a good balance of the villains that they brought in. Um, I see every now and then certain posts about people saying, "Oh, why didn't they bring in this character? Why didn't they bring in that character?" And it's like, well, again, too many,
Too
right?
many.
Then
Yeah.
it just becomes it waters down what's already there. Um, so, but I liked it. I appreciated the fact that they actually went so far as to give certain villains a redemption arc as well, especially Doc Ock. That was a really great one because he's the one that really stands out to me from the initial Spider-Man films. There are people who still say that Spider-Man 2 is the best Spider-Man movie
Hmm.
and even one of the best superhero movies in general,
Yeah.
which I agree with. I think
Hmm.
I think it was a fantastic, fantastic film. And I think part of what made it so amazing is the human side to the way Alfred Molina plays Doc Ock,
Hmm.
right? He's this character, he's like a Frankenstein's monster in a lot of ways. He's a character that, at once you're scared of him, but you feel sorry for him
Hmm.
because you understand where he's coming from, and you see that he's actually a good person that's been corrupted by his own technology. So
Hmm.
it's like he's a
He's just
monster of his own make.
yeah, he's technically just trying to do something for kind of like Iron Man, trying to make something that will help people grow, but he just happens to, at least in the
Right,
in the movies wise, the quote
right, in the
unquote
movie, yes.
power of the sun. He kept on saying that in this movie all the time too, talking about the arc
Yeah,
reactor and everything. But he essentially was trying to build that as well, right? Trying to build some sort of sustainable energy source that just you just had to have this whatever the element was called that Oscorp had, blah blah
yeah,
blah, and then it was literally just the chip getting fried, and like same thing with the with Green Goblin with Otto, or not Otto, with
Norman.
Norman, thank you, Like same thing. It's just like it's almost like a superhero soldier serum, but like so without the MCU-ness of it, obviously, where it just
Well,
yeah, and then just kind of
I
corrupted
find
him, and yeah,
I find it too different. The two characters slightly different though in terms of motivations. In the sense that whereas Otto is doing everything from a purely altruistic standpoint. Um, it, he really has this desire to do what he does out of a sense of good and public good, and he wants to help the world. Um, I found that Norman, on the other hand, it, he suffered a little bit more from the classic villain um, syndrome in the sense of he gives in to his fears, and he takes the serum prematurely because he's afraid they're going to take his company and all these things. So he's kind of doing it more for selfish reasons than he is for altruistic or noble reasons.
true.
And I find that's what differentiates the two characters. And then somewhere in the middle, you've got a guy like the Sandman, who he's like this petty criminal who just wants to go home and see his kid.
Hmm.
So it's like he's not a good guy, but he's not really that bad of a guy either, right? Like
Kind of like
like
Scott Lang.
yeah,
Because
exactly.
yeah, Ant-Man could be, if you split the script, you could make that story into literally to negative thing, because he's like
That's true.
yeah, he pulls like a Robin Hood of like stealing from the rich to give to the poor type thing in the Ant-Man movie or whatever. And he's in prison and he's a dirtbag, he can't get a job and blah blah, and then he goes back to
Yeah,
criminal actions, but it's just he's trying to make good so he can see his daughter again, and then it just flips.
that's right.
But they wrote it in a hero story. But then, yeah, Sandman,
Yes.
he gets written as a villain, so it's very similar stories if you look at it that way. But it's just
Mhm.
literally how the writers want to make you feel about it.
That's right. Exactly. And it all comes down to whose perspective are we seeing the story from, right? And I think you'd have a lot more sympathy for a character if you're seeing it through their eyes. And maybe that's why Spider-Man 2 worked so well, is because we are seeing a lot of that story through Doc Ock's eyes,
Mm-hmm.
right? And from his perspective as well. And I think that's part of what makes him such a sympathetic character. Even when he turns into a villain, we're still like, I know there's a good guy somewhere under there,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like almost like we're just hoping that he'll emerge again. So it was great to see that actually happen in this film.
And which he actually doesn't at the end of Spider-Man 2. He ends up like bringing it back down on himself, type the bridge or whatever. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie, but
Right.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, and that's what's so exactly that's what's so great about it in comparison to Green Goblin. But talking about Green Goblin though,
Yes.
remind me on Willem Dafoe. Holy shit! You're talking about Andrew Garfield being a great. Willem Dafoe is just he has such the face, the expressions, the everything was just
He's
like
amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, honestly, there's no surprises there for me. I mean, Willem Dafoe is just like one of the best actors ever. So the fact that he's able to pull it off so amazingly is, to me, it's like it's not surprising. I've loved everything he's done pretty much ever. Um, but it's great to see the range that they gave him in this film. It's like you can tell he's having fun
Mm-hmm.
with this movie because they gave him a lot to work with, right? His character is not just some one note character. He really has some meat to it, and it's funny. I've actually seen some calls for people saying like, "Oh, he should be nominated for Academy Award and stuff like this." And I'm not opposed to that. Just to me, it's like one of those things where it was hard for me to pick out a standout performance in this film because I thought there were a number of really, really strong performances.
Mm-hmm.
Tom Holland, I think, does a phenomenal job. Andrew Garfield does a phenomenal job. Willem Dafoe, um, even Marissa Tomei, I thought did a great job.
Yeah.
As Aunt May, like
As showing her sympathy for these people and everything like that, and
yeah,
and showing the like mother like feeling that she has with Peter and everything throughout all of her appearances, even though they've been brief, and this has been the longest kind of time that she's been on screen. I'm pretty sure, basically, with
Yeah.
I think she had a little bit longer. I think each movie she gets a little bit more, obviously. But
Mhm.
like she actually got to show a little bit stronger range, her death scene and everything like that, and
Definitely.
sympathy, and yeah. And then
Yeah.
literally that straight contrast of Tom, like, or not contrast, sorry, but Tom switching right into like the pain of him losing someone again, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So the only thing that I'm still, and I maybe it gets explained in somewhere, but the only thing that I'm still confused by that they still haven't elaborated is what actually happened to his Uncle Ben. Because like, did Uncle Ben is he already dead? He just didn't say the "with great power" line to him when he died, or and then they left it,
It,
or like yeah.
it's interesting. Like I was thinking about a similar thing, and it's like I was trying to remember: is there actually an Uncle Ben referenced in the Tom Holland ones? Like I can't I honestly can't
The
remember
only
because
yeah,
we meet him when it's only him and Aunt May, right? So I'm not even sure if it's like is there a comment even in passing about it?
there's two things I can think of. One
Okay,
was in is it Civil War when he first gets introduced? No, I think I think
yeah,
it's in
Civil
Civil
War,
War when he
the
first gets
Civil War.
introduced. But
Yep.
there's a he says something. Peter says something about when you have responsibility and then the people die, you feel guilty about it or something like that. So he kind of like vaguely references it.
Oh,
He makes
right.
it
Okay.
doesn't actually mention by name. And then in Far From Home, his briefcase has the initials of um, Ben Parker or something like that
Oh,
on it.
okay. Okay.
There's a
Then
little, so they kind of reference that he, either so that's either Peter's parents. I don't. There's initials on there. So
gotcha.
there has
Gotcha.
been kind of like hints or whatever at it, but nothing.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they didn't really go into it very much, though, did they? So I'm guessing it means that Uncle Ben never actually said those words. Um, you know,
yeah.
but
Well, at
it
least
worked.
yeah,
It worked.
yeah,
It worked in
exactly.
this case. Yeah.
So now, okay, but also like this has been really good. Oh, one other thing I wanted to say before I continue on to this,
Yeah.
Jamie Foxx's Electro. Jamie Foxx, like, it was so good because he had a good but weird appearance in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Like he kind of first everyone hated the fact that he was like blue for some reason and everything. Like I don't know why. Like I never really understood the Electro character when I watched Amazing Spider-Man 2, so it didn't really bother me personally. But
Mhm.
in this, I did like the color scheme, how they brought it in, how they kind of made like the arc reactor make it so that his powers changed to. No, that's not. He just randomly had yellow lightning just for whatever reason. But then when he shows up at the Statue of Liberty, they actually make like his electricity kind of form into his kind of
The
classic,
mask.
the mask
Yeah.
shape or whatever, just to at least
Yeah.
throw in a
Yeah.
nod to it. Yeah.
Totally. Totally. Um, I liked his character. I thought it was well done. I found he was to me it was a very different character than Amazing Spider-Man 2. Just sort of a different personality, different persona. This one was much more assured of himself, and unlike the other villains in this tale, I felt this one was sort of irredeemable. Like I even at the end of the movie when they sort of take his powers away, you don't get the sense that he's changed for the better because of it. You
Mm-hmm.
get the sense that he's just like, well, I lost my powers, and I guess that's kind of it. But the way that they portray the character, I wouldn't put it past them to just rip that thing out of his chest and be like, okay, now I've got my powers back again,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he didn't look like he had a change of heart, whereas the other characters all did in their own way. Um, so it's the one character that maybe if there's a third Andrew Garfield, they bring that character back. I don't know.
Yeah.
There you go.
He exactly. He was good, but yeah, that's a good way of putting it. Like interesting, but not. the same. But if they made him the same, then he would just be too. Because I think Andrew Garfield even brings it up. He's like, "Man, you used to be this quiet guy and everything," and it's like, yeah. So
Yeah.
that's the thing. But no. So I was gonna say, there's a couple back to what we were talking about before about like the jokes and stuff. I wanted to bring up the like references they did, the Spider-Man pointing to each other meme. I'm a bit of a scientist myself. Like they referenced a few like memes and stuff and jokes, and I love how I think it was Tobey Maguire, Spider-Man. He was like, "Yeah, my best friend tried to kill me," and then Ned's like, "I promise I won't try to kill you. I won't become evil."
Yeah. I know they had some great moments like that. I found the banter was great, and to be honest, there was more of it than I expected. Usually, like with all the things you hear about the film, and even going into it with the fact that they're pulling the villains out of the original universes, it'd be like, well, how could they not bring the Spider-Man into it? It would just be such a wasted opportunity. And I know they tried to keep it under wraps, but in a really poor way. I honestly don't know why they don't just admit these things anymore. Like they don't have to say no. They can just say, look, just see it for yourself, right? And that's all anybody needs to say. But even so, that said, I think there was more to each of the Spider-Men than I expected. They weren't just simple
cameos,
supporting characters and cameos, right? Where they just pop in and be like, "Hey, I'm the original Spider-Man, and I'll do one little thing, and then I'm gone for the rest of the movie," right? Which is what most films would do in a situation like this.
Yeah.
So it's nice that these guys actually made them an integral part of the story, and the fact that Tom Holland's Peter wouldn't be able to succeed without them, right? It's not just like a one hero's journey. It's almost like no, it's going to take all three of them to do this, and save the world.
And as you were just saying, each one brought something that the other one didn't have to the picture, right? So, and I like organic web shooters, like just randomly, and they keep on, and even when they're making their plan and discussing like what they're going to do, they're like, but how does it work? And they're just just bringing up. And
I love that he doesn't want to talk about it. That was the best part. Like, can we just move on?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because and that is call back to like the fans too, because like because everyone's like, but why are his organic, like, what? How come he doesn't have the mechanical ones? And there were so many things of like, I don't know. Sam Raimi just made a decision.
Right. I mean, they even made the joke back the other way, right? When Peter's like, I am one of the Avengers, and they're like, wow, that's so cool. Is that a band or something? It's like, because they don't exist in their universe. So I thought that was really clever.
Yeah, exactly. Yes. Okay, so obviously, as we were both just saying, this is one of the biggest, definitely the biggest of Phase 4 so far, of all projects and everything, and probably up there with Endgame for like spectacle and budget and being holy shit crazy. But regardless of that, I'm still gonna try to pull your leg and do what I do every time. Other than what we already talked about with Electro, give me a couple things that you didn't like about it. That's always the harder part.
Well, you know what? This is one of those things where when you have this much previous story to rely on, in this case, you've got three, not three. Let's see, Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, and then 2 Garfield. So 5 Spider-Man films, and then plus 2 MCU Spider-Man films. Not to mention all the other appearances by Spider-Man, the other films, like God, there's like 10 movies,
like Civil War, and yeah.
So it's like easily 10 films, if not more, of history, sort of in just this one film to sort of tap into for each of these characters, and you're sort of lumping that all together. So when you're doing that, I think as a writer, it becomes very challenging in sometimes how do you avoid certain plot holes? How do you avoid callbacks to certain things? Like, for example, Electro. You know, that's a great example there where it's like he's not the same character really. Like he doesn't look the same, he doesn't act the same. Yet we all know it's Jamie Foxx because Jamie Foxx played the same guy in the Amazing Spider-Man, so we know it's the same character, and yet he's not quite how we remember him. And so it becomes a sort of, I think, balance, this fine line that you have to walk as this tightrope as a writer to say, look, we need this character or this plot point to be like this to craft a good story. And sometimes it might go a little bit against what we've previously established, and that's okay. Or in the case of, say, the MacGuffin of Doctor Strange's spell, there's the idea of like, why is it only these specific characters that came through? Why didn't other characters come through? Why,
or like how Electro technically didn't know who Andrew Garfield that he like that was another thing that like didn't think about it when going into the movie, but then you think about it afterwards. It was like, wait, he didn't actually know. He never saw him at like. So why him?
That was the other big. That was the other big plot hole. Thank you for pointing that one out, because he did like Electro didn't actually know that Peter Parker was Spider-Man, and even in the movie he goes, "I thought you were a black guy."
Yeah,
and so that like proves he doesn't know that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. So how could he be in this universe? Like how could
with the spell? Yeah,
it shouldn't have been able to bring him into this universe. So there's a plot hole. There's an obvious plot hole, but it's one of those things like you just kind of got to be like, well, Venom I think is another example of that at the sort of end, because Tom Hardy, Eddie Brock, has no idea who Peter Parker is or who Spider-Man is. They make that very clear. So it's only Venom that knows who Peter Parker is and that he's Spider-Man. But how does Venom know this if he's from a different universe? So it's like, it sort of brings up these little questions, but at the end of the day, you just sort of have to be like, well, you know what? When it comes to these superhero films, I think it's getting tougher and tougher for them to craft a story that's so airtight that you don't have any plot holes because it's gone on for so long.
Yeah.
Shang-Chi, like that's a great example of that as well, right? Like where in crafting this idea of the 10 rings, they sort of retcon that entire history of the 10 rings and make it something completely different from everything that we've seen up to this point.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, like I kind of buy it, I guess, as far as the story goes, but it doesn't really make all the sense in the world, right?
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised Iron Man 3, like Kevin Feige and Disney, and like I'm kind of surprised they even let that even happen. Like, oh, it's just a fake guy, and then they even showed him wearing the actual rings on his finger and everything as the but Mandarin. Like Mandarin, but like that was the whole thing, and then even another plot like thing with going back to the 10 rings there. It's like they mentioned that he had these rings for centuries or whatever back in the Middle Ages or whatever. For these have these mystical powers, but yet in the Sanctum Sanctorum and everywhere where they keep an eye on magical relics and stuff like that, they had never heard of it. There's no history.
I know at the end that part made no sense.
Yeah,
how they're like analyzing them. They're like, I've never seen it or heard any of that. It's like, how do you not know this? Like, isn't this your job?
Yeah,
literally to know about everything like this on planet Earth.
But
right, so yeah, that's an excellent point.
Yeah,
so it's bound to happen.
Yeah, exactly. So, So regardless, it was definitely a crazy good movie. There was a lot of like holy shit, like yes moments, like and even callbacks, kind of even subtle callbacks to previous movies without it even being that big. Like something simple like MJ still wearing her Black Dahlia necklace. Like, she still wears it broken, even though she doesn't know who Peter even is by the end. Or at the end, how it, like, he has Ned's little Palpatine Lego guy or whatever. And, like, he goes into an apartment. And I remember thinking when Peter's in his apartment by himself, I'm just like, Rand! from Spider-Man 2, 3. I don't remember which one it is. Yeah. And it's like, it's just the little things. It's like the little jokes.
It's funny though, like now that you mentioned that, all that stuff, it's like there's some huge plot holes there at the very end, with the world forgetting, that Peter is Spider-Man. It's like there's some things that happen that really don't make any sense if you think about it, in the sense of like, just because people forget that Peter is Spider-Man doesn't mean they should forget Peter, and yet the world forgets Peter Parker.
Mm-hmm.
So like MJ has no idea who he is. Ned has no idea who he is. It's like, has he vanished from like the school records? Is he no longer in their yearbook? There were all these videos of him like around, all this time. It's like, yeah, I understand people forgot, but did Doctor Strange scrub the world of Peter's existence?
See, I think if I remember correctly, he changed the spell slightly at the end of the movie compared to the one at the beginning. Because at the beginning it was like make everyone forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Where this one, I think it was everyone forget who Peter Parker is as a person. So that's where they change it. So exactly, it's like they could have just kept it as forget that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, but I think they did that in a way to kind of reboot, almost reboot the like quote unquote like a soft reboot so they can continue on with the character.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. It was one of those things like, I've seen it pointed out where people said like, okay, but does that mean like all the newspapers and TV, shows and all the media, all the computer files, everything that has Peter Parker,
school,
and Spider-Man, like everything's all gone now, right? All that information's gone. And so it didn't really explain that. And it's just one of those things where you're like,
do you know what my theory? I'm just randomly thinking of this right now. Do you remember in I think it's the 6th or 7th Harry Potter movie, Hermione does a spell where she makes her Muggle parents, her human parents, forget her, and it even shows. And then it shows in that movie. It shows like pictures of her her and her family. Like she fades away from like pictures and stuff like that. So that could be a similar thing in this, whereas it could be, obviously it's completely different universes, but it could be a similar thing as where literally this spell literally like erases videos, it deletes pictures, it like somehow gets rid of media, like all of the like memories of like Endgame when because they remember, like say that they remember Spider-Man, but they don't know who Peter Parker is, because or like in Infinity War when he first meets Doctor Strange, he's like, oh, you're using our made up name? I'm Spider-Man. Like he introduced himself as Peter Parker first, so Doctor Strange would only remember the Spider-Man name. Like, it's just because it erases.
And it would have been cool if they just shown something like that happening, as the spell is going. If we could have seen that, like, in a very simple way, if MJ had a phone on her or something with a picture of her and Peter together on the screen, and then we see his picture fade away and it's just her left on the screen, that would have been right there. We would have seen in one very quick, easy way what's happening and that how the world is forgetting him.
Yeah, exactly. Because it wouldn't have been hard for them to do it. It would have taken an extra moment. It would have been similar as like the characters being dusted away in Endgame or Infinity War. It would just be literally
it would have taken just something as that simple. I think it's I don't know, maybe it's one of those things where it's like, because there's so many moving pieces, when you're putting together a movie of this scale, I think things are just bound to fall between the cracks. And I think sometimes all it takes is sort of fresh eyes on something to sort of point out a lot of these things. But And then things sometimes get filmed and then they get lost in the editing process because of the time constraints or budget or whatever.
Mhm.
So I because I've seen that happen before in films where maybe there's a plot hole and it's explained completely in a deleted scene,
Hmm. Yeah,
right?
like
And
the first
so
Avengers movie where there's the random waitress who's like important, like why she's important to
yes,
seeing his face, and then it's like, oh, they deleted scene of where Cap has dinner at her restaurant or whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
it totally makes sense why she's suddenly an important figure. Yeah,
yeah,
whereas the way the movie plays out, you're like, I don't understand. Like,
hmm,
what's the significance here,
yeah.
right? Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay.
There, yeah.
Well, last little remarks on Spider-Man here. If anything to talk about, and then before we can jump into a few other things.
um, I just found it overall a really solid film, and I think part of the reason is,
Fan base.
well, the fan base for one, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, people love, people love the Spider-Man franchise, and they love each of the actors who've done the film. Some have more fans than others, but the fact that you're able to have them all in the same film, now you've sort of expanded that fan base to each of those fan bases to suddenly want to come together, right? So I think it was a brilliant marketing from a marketing standpoint, but also I found the story itself was really really well done. They crafted a very vulnerable, flawed hero in Peter, especially this time around. I found he's always been the kid who wasn't sure of himself and his place in the world, and whether or not he could live up to the legacy left to him by Iron Man. Um, and it sort of really came to a head in this film. And the fact that they gave him some serious flaws. It wasn't like you know, something superficial or something that he could overcome just like that. Um, there were some real inner demons that he had to overcome, and even the other Spider-Man too, which was really kind of cool to see. The fact that each of them kind of had something they needed to overcome in this, and it was by working together that they did so. And with Tom Holland's Peter in particular, one thing that this movie did so well versus Shang-Chi, versus Captain Marvel, versus arguably Black Widow. Um, there's a host of recent Marvel films where I find the characters are very Mary Sue-ish. They're perfect for lack of a better word. They really have no flaws. They have nothing to overcome. Shang-Chi was a very frustrating watch for me. I really wanted to like the movie.
Hmm.
I like the actor who portrayed him. I found him to be very charismatic and likable. I liked Aquafina. I really liked her
Yeah,
character.
yeah.
I thought she was a great comic relief. Um, but at heart, my problem with Shang Chi, the character, was the guy was perfect. He had no flaws. Like he had nothing he needed to overcome. The first time we meet him on the bus when these bad guys are trying to kill him, here's a guy who's lived as a bus boy or not a bus boy, a valet,
Valet.
parking valet,
Yeah.
um, for the last 10 years of his life, 20 years. I can't remember how long he's been in hiding for. If it's 10 or
I
20
think
years.
it was like 10
Uh,
years. Yeah.
10 years. Okay. So 10 years, he's never lifted a finger against anybody. These guys show up. He kicks the crap out of them like that. Like, I mean, there was like
No struggle.
no struggle at all. And he just sort of moved, on to the next bigger boss, bigger boss, bigger boss. The only time he felt he has any trouble is with the two women in his life, one being his sister, one being his aunt, who are, and there you feel like he's just holding back. And that's really the only reason why he's kind of fighting to a standstill with them. It's not because he's actually going to lose those fights. It's more like, oh, I'm not really
Not trying
putting it
as.
all out there.
Yeah.
And then when the big conflict comes at the end, he beats that monster like without any trouble whatsoever,
With,
and he doesn't have to sacrifice anything.
yeah,
And that was the thing that really got to me. There was zero sacrifice required on his part. Contrast that with Spider-Man. Spider-Man, here's a guy who in the course of this film, his aunt is sacrificed, the person he loves the most in the world, right? And then his friendship is sacrificed with the people he loves, and then even the love of his life, his relationship with her is sacrificed. He severs every single relationship in the world just so he can save the world.
mm-hmm.
Talk about high stakes. Shang-Chi had nothing like that. Captain Marvel had nothing like that. That to me, that's sort of endemic of a lot of the Phase 4 films, is the fact that they sort of introduce these characters that really have nothing to aspire to because they're already so great and so perfect. Arguably one could say that the Black Panther didn't do that, that it actually did the more classic hero's journey, and that's one of the reasons why I think Black Panther is a superior film to those ones, because like Peter in this film, T'Challa had flaws to overcome, and he had failures.
Mm-hmm.
Like he actually lost a couple of times, right? Mm-hmm. And to me, that's what makes a great hero, is the fact that you have to lose to win.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have a character like Shang-Chi or Captain Marvel who never loses.
Yeah. Captain Marvel is just a big beat stick that just like somehow is more powerful than same thing with like Wanda. It's like, and that's the thing. And I think using Captain Marvel and Wanda, for example, and I think they're making those two characters so perfect because for the quote unquote representation, right? For women, right? Because every hero, every major hero, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Superman, whomever, is a man. So they're trying to make them even better than what they would actually be. Because
I get that. Yeah, I get all of that.
Yeah.
I understand the whole. The whole argument is that you can't show flaws because by showing flaws, it's somehow sexist or racist or what have you. But that's not human.
Mm-hmm.
Humanity means having flaws. The best female heroes that I've grown up with were Sigourney Weaver in Aliens, or Linda Hamilton in Terminator and Terminator 2. These were women who were flawed. They had weaknesses. They had self-doubt. They had inner demons. They had obstacles both inside and out that they had to overcome. Mm-hmm. And by the end of their struggles, they do. And it makes their journey so much more memorable and so much more heroic, and makes them as female icons that much more so. To me, those are the female heroes that we should show young girls today and aspire to, and say, like, look, this is what a female hero looks like in a movie.
Mm-hmm.
But if you show them somebody who's perfect, who never fails and never has to really even try at anything, what lesson does that teach anybody, like, let alone girls, but boys as well, like any kid? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, if everything's just given to you, if you're just good at everything your first time around, and you don't have to try, I think you're doing a great disservice, because then a lot of kids will grow up with an entitlement fixation, basically saying, well, my hero doesn't have to try, so why should I have to try?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So it's either that, or so that's the Captain Marvel thing. She just she just wins. There's nothing wrong. Or on the opposite side, Scarlet Witch, she's literally just, oh, I'm here doing this because, like you look at the WandaVision show, she's doing all this for grief, for just because to get for like a man, quote unquote. I know Vision's not technically human, but right. For love interest of someone else. Like, it's not for her own there's no empowerment of herself being a flawed person. It's literally just, oh, my person
Mhm.
died. That's why all this is happening. Like,
Right. Yeah. It's I think a lot of it comes from fear, and by that I mean fear of the people making these films. I think they're just scared. They're scared of taking off the certain certain groups in our society. They're afraid if they don't placate to them and give them exactly what they're calling for, that you know. Then they'll be I don't know, canceled or whatever you want to call it. Sort of pushed aside and said like, okay, if you're not giving us what we want, we're going to get it from this person.
mhm,
Um, but the problem is, at the end of the day, what the thing that suffers is the story. You're making a weaker story. You're making weaker characters overall. Give me a story where a hero has flaws and um, inner demons to overcome, and I guarantee you that's a story that will always resonate with people, and that will always be 10 times more powerful than the story where a hero has nothing to
yeah.
overcome. I mean, you look at the ultimate Mary Stu in comics, that's Superman.
I was just gonna say, yeah,
You know,
Superman. That's why people find him boring because there's nothing to relate to, and other
they
than,
do,
yeah,
they
there's.
do. But the interesting thing with Superman, sorry, let me just if I can just
Oh,
finish my
sorry.
thought.
Yeah,
The
sorry.
interesting thing with Superman is he was so perfect when they first created him, because the whole idea is he's a Superman. He's supposed to be beyond um, humanity. It's almost like he's something. He's this godlike creature that we somehow aspire to. But then, like you say, he he became this one note um, character in that, well, he has no weaknesses. That as a spectacle is only entertaining for so long,
Hmm.
right? Because you're like, well, if nothing hurts him and he's got no weaknesses, then why am I invested in this at all, right? So that's why they invented kryptonite. Um, was to give him a weakness, give him something that the bad guys could use to defeat him. The problem was that kryptonite was only an external weakness.
Hmm.
It's nothing to do with his inner character. As far as his inner character goes, Superman doesn't really have any demons. He doesn't really have anything to overcome other than the fact that he's an alien living among us and he's trying desperately to be human. And he never really can be. He's always holding back. And I think it's like that as a flaw is a very minor flaw, right? Like the idea that you're too powerful and you're always trying to just dial down your power. And
Hmm.
in a way, they did that with Captain Marvel. Um, but the problem, I think, with Captain Marvel is that character doesn't have the fan base and the history that Superman does.
Hmm.
So, Superman, I think people are willing to sort of overlook a lot of this because of the character's history. If you look at the superpowered heroes that come out now who are on his level, your Omni Man in Invincible himself,
Hmm.
Homelander and the
Homelander. Yeah.
boys.
Yeah.
Every one of them is so flawed.
Hmm.
Like Superman seems like an absolute saint compared to any of these guys, right?
Hmm.
Because the writers know after all this time that you can't just introduce a perfect character. No, if you're going to introduce somebody who's so super powered, they better have some internal flaws to counteract um, all these external powers that they have.
Hmm.
So that's something I think that Captain Marvel's missing, especially Captain Marvel, because they've set her up to be like the most powerful hero, and to a lesser extent Wanda. Um, they're missing that internal struggle. At least Wanda, I think they showed an internal struggle with her more so than Captain Marvel did.
Hmm.
Um, at least she was trying
Well, she's going through like
to
the loss of like her brother in Age of Ultron,
yeah.
and then going through the loss of her being the one having to actually kill Vision initially, And then
Yeah,
like so she does feel loss and grief and trying to literally in Civil War when she literally accidentally kills how like say 10 people or whatever in Wakanda or not Wakanda in wherever they were in that movie.
Sokovia.
Sokovia,
Yeah,
thank you. And then
yeah,
and so she does feel grief. She does still feel a lot of. She does have that emotional human response still too.
totally. I think one of the things with Wanda that I think sets her apart or one of the, I should say one of the mistakes they made with WandaVision, um, they gave her internal flaws to try to counter the external power that she has. In the sense of through her grief, she's trying to rewrite the world essentially and create this happy place for herself. And it's sort of like a coping mechanism, right, for all the pain that she's in. And what was interesting was I felt as a motivation for a character, I felt it was a really strong one. The problem I felt was by the end, you realize she's actually the villain of the tale because she's doing everything from a selfish standpoint. She's doing it to heal herself. And yet, the show went out of its way to excuse the behavior and say, oh, it's okay. They'll never understand what you went through. And it's like, are you kidding me? She just enslaved an entire town and rewrote people's minds. Like it's like she literally mind raped this entire town. And it's like, but because she's going through pain, it's somehow okay. Um, and it's not. That's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the show never actually explicitly says that what she did was flat out wrong.
Yeah.
Um,
I think they're gonna touch on that a
to me that
little
was.
bit in Multiverse of Madness, considering they do reference that
I hope
in the
so.
trailer. I think they
I
because
hope so.
yeah they do. I think, but hopefully it's not just a little bit of a oh yeah no it was fine, but like hopefully they go through that a little
Yeah.
bit because she even says like I'm not here to no Doctor Strange goes in the trailer he's like I'm not here to talk about Westview or whatever, and so it looks like they're just gonna blow over this whole thing.
Yeah, and I think that's a missed opportunity if that's the case, um, because it's it's kind of analogous to being like, okay, you just committed all these crimes, um, and again, out of a sense of bettering yourself or wanting to better yourself, but does that excuse the fact that you did these crimes, and should that go, um, unpunished? Should it go unchallenged? Should you have to pay a price for hurting all these people? And to me, it's like I think there should be some consequence more than just like, oh, I'm just gonna go, you know, live in the mountains because away from
Yeah,
everybody. It's like
yeah.
that's not so.
Consider,
I don't know.
yeah. Considering they did show in Civil War that there is something that can dampen her powers. Granted, her powers are a lot stronger now compared to in Civil War when she was not introduced, but when she was not as strong. But like she had the collar on in when she was in the raft in Civil War, so they could technically imprison her for what she did. It would be difficult to get to her to do that. That would be an interesting, maybe like a
Yeah.
Marvel short or something like that to try to, to
Mhm.
try to tie it in or something. But on how something
I
like
don't know.
that would
To me,
happen.
it's like well, I think that's sort of it comes down to that idea of like what makes a hero again. To me, if someone was truly heroic, then they would take they would hold themselves accountable
Hmm.
for their actions. They would say, "Look, I what I did was wrong." At some point, they would realize that what they're doing is wrong, and they would own up to it. And they would say, like, what I did was wrong, and I need to pay the consequences for it, whatever that is.
Hmm.
In this case, it's like imagine if that show had ended with her giving herself up and saying, like, you know, put this collar on me, depower me. What I need to pay for what I've done. It's like, ooh, that's a character that's showing remorse. That's a character that realizes what they did was wrong. and is trying to atone for it. I didn't get a sense of any of that from the way that show ended. She just said basically, "Don't you even think about following me? I'm leaving."
Mm-hmm.
That's like, okay, that's not a character that's sorry for what they did
No.
at all. It's that's a character that's just like, moving on.
Mm-hmm. But
So
yeah, like I said, maybe they'll elaborate it more in Multiverse of Madness in May, I think, when that comes out. But you never know, right? But no, I think you have a good point. I don't think it will go into, and nothing probably will happen. It will just be a like an FU to her character, and just be like, okay, well, this happened, and then like they did it to kind of show a whole new style. The show, like the whole show in general, is okay, but like as a person, as a character, she just changed so much. Just like what you were saying with the Electro, like she's like completely different person, and they're just gonna say, okay, yeah, that's just who she is now, and not even do and kind of just flip
that
over
could
that.
easily be.
Yeah.
Yep.
Before we kind of like throw things off here, I know we were on a bit of a tangent there, but we'll go to something in general. Just quickly here, I know we were just talking about WandaVision, and you were talking about Captain Marvel, which was not last year, but out of all of like WandaVision, Falcon, Winter Soldier, Loki, What If, Hawkeye, all the Disney Plus shows, what would you say was the best developed in that same way of characters that show who they are, their flaws, their people, their decision making, and do you think with what they learned from their each individual show, will it actually continue on into the future?
I'll preface it by saying I'm only one episode in Hawkeye. I've been playing catch up. There's so many other shows and things I had on my sort of to watch list that I've been getting through that I'm literally just one episode in.
Fair enough. There's a lot of shows.
So I can't really speak to that show yet. But as for the other ones, I think each of them had their strengths. Each of them had their weaknesses. I liked What If as a concept. I thought it was a great one. I found some stories stronger than others. And but what I did like was how they brought all of the stories together towards the end. I really like that. I think they left enough sort of open avenues in that What If world that they could pick it up easily for like a season 2 of continuations of some of the stories. Like the one, for example, that sticks in my head is it's Peter Parker, isn't it? Who takes Doctor Strange's cloak?
Yeah, in the zombie episode. Yeah.
Yeah. And we never really see what happens with that storyline beyond that end point. And even though they revisit the zombie universe as part of the grand finale, we never see that character again or where that storyline leads. So it leaves me sort of hopeful that they will revisit some of these branched off stories. I thought Loki was a decent show. I always love Tom Hiddleston. I think he's amazing. I love his portrayal of Loki. It's one of my favorite characters. That said, I found this one to be a much weaker version of Loki. And I don't mean that in the sense of like depowered. I mean that in the sense of I found the Loki previously to be a much more capable, much smarter, much more assertive. This one came across as much, I don't know, dumber somehow. Like he needed to be led by the hand. He couldn't figure out a lot of the stuff for himself. There were times when I thought for sure he knows what's going on, but he's not letting it on. And then it turned out, no, he actually had no idea what was going on, and he had to have the truth revealed. And it just, to me, it went against the character, a character that's been around for like thousands of years, whose entire existence is about deceiving people and uncovering truth from lie,
Hmm.
and that he can't tell what's true and what's not. That just sort of rang hollow. But that said, I loved the planet of Lokis. That was amazing.
Hmm.
You know, all the different Lokis. I thought that was so well done.
I like I like
Especially,
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say I liked the development of Sylvie and giving her whole like personality as still being a Loki, but having
Mhm.
her own life and how she's kind of like a Lady Loki from the comics, but kind of not like slash Lady Sif. Like she's kind of an amalgamation of two Loki characters or whatever,
For
basically.
sure.
And
Yeah.
I like she was definitely and I think a lot of people would agree that she was more of the standout of the show, which I think the I think they were trying to kind of push her towards being more of the main character than Tom Hiddleston, almost.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, but it's at once, you know, I think one of the big criticisms that I've seen of Loki is the fact that he really almost became a supporting character in his own show.
Yes, I remember you
You
saying that when
know,
we talked about it. Yeah.
yeah, and which is I think a valid point. You know, um, if the show is going to be about about you, and this is one of the criticisms I've heard about Hawkeye as well. And again, I can't speak to it because I haven't watched it, but I've heard this criticism is that Hawkeye himself is a supporting character in his own show.
Hmm.
So I'm eager to see if that's actually the case. Episode one um, is definitely more geared towards Kate Bishop's character than it is Hawkeye's, but I understand it because we already know so much of his backstory, whereas we know nothing of hers. So it makes sense to me that you want to set up more of her character than his. But I'm curious to see, is there a balance between the two, or is it going to be kind of heavy towards one character or the other? Um, so, okay,
Mm.
I guess that answers my question.
No, well, no. Without going to spoilers for you or anything for it, it's. I think it is a pretty good balance between continuing Hawkeye's story and introducing Kate Bishop. It's a pretty good balance because then, like I was saying earlier, they're doing a lot of things where they're introducing new characters so they can continue on the stories. So they have to have a
Mhm.
good balance of Hawkeye, Clint, and to introduce, but to still grow her as a person. So I think it's a pretty good balance. I
Yeah.
think. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know that in the comics she becomes Hawkeye, so it's like it's clear to me that that's what she's destined to become in this show. Um, so I get the idea that why there's a split, a focus of attention on one and the other.
Hmm.
Um, but that said, I do have to admit though I found the pilot interesting in the sense that a lot of stuff happens in the show that just comes across as like it only happens because the story needs it to happen to keep progressing, as opposed to like it's more coincidence or convenience rather than actually being driven by something concrete. As an example of that, the fact that she sort of stumbles on this Ronin suit that Clint wore, and it's like totally by accident. And then she puts it on, but there's no real reason for her to put it on. And then once she puts it on, she keeps it on, which is like really weird, especially because there's like an entire mafia after her, and she's just a teenage girl, and there's literally no reason for her to keep wearing this outfit, especially out in public,
Hmm.
and yet she does. And then she breaks into some old man's house simply because the story needs her to do so to
Hmm.
discover him dead. It's like just a number of things happen just so that it forces Clint out of retirement to confront her in the end of the episode.
Hmm.
And I thought they could have done it in a more clever way rather than being so kind of heavy-handed about it and being like, okay, we just need to get to this point by the end of the episode. So what pieces can we put together? What dominoes can we have fall for that to happen? And yet sort of ignoring that big question, which I think every writer needs at all times to pose. And that is the question, why? Why is this happening?
Mm-hmm.
Why is this character doing the things that they're doing? Why are they making the decisions that they're making? Why are they continuing down the path that they're going? And I find lots of times, in modern theater, whether that's TV, whether that's film, that question sort of becomes a secondary question. Whereas I try to approach it as a writer in the sense of like, I need to keep coming back to that question, and I need to keep asking myself of my characters that question. And I think that only strengthens your story. And I'm not perfect at it, far from it. But I think if you're going to do a justice to your story, you need to keep going back to it. And if anything doesn't make sense, if anything makes you question it, like I just did, then you're saying, you need to say to yourself, okay, it's not there yet.
Mm-hmm.
It needs work.
But that's the difference, I think, between an independent writer like yourself compared to someone who has a group of a team like Disney that has a group of writers where they have to do it, they have to get this point, they have to do that. They,
Yep.
Producers breathing down their neck. Okay, we'll have to do this. We have to film now.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that's the shitty thing though, is that I agree with you 100%. If you have the time to do it and try to elaborate and build your character as much as possible and your story to get them forward. Granted, I'm not even close to a writer in any way, shape, or form, but you
make a really good point.
Yeah, but when you have,
I think that's an excellent point, and I think what it requires when you're talking about, like, I understand it, and I agree with you 1,000%. I understand the challenges of it. I've worked with other writers before. I've worked on films, where you've got like I've got other writers involved. I've got a director involved who wants certain things. I've got maybe sometimes there's producers who want certain things. Maybe the actors themselves want certain things, and so it becomes this balancing act. Especially if you're part of a writers group, that's a whole unique set of challenges, right? Because egos come into play, different viewpoints come into play. Sometimes things make sense in your own head, and maybe other people aren't seeing it quite the same way you are, and so that maybe will cause friction and things like this. So I get it. I get it. It's very push and pull, right? Give and take. And I think maybe the way to get around that is that there's one person who is invested, like really invested in the product, who will sit there and be like, I'm going to ask the why questions, and you guys need to answer them. As an example, I'll give you an example. So Sons of Anarchy, right? You had Kurt Sutter. He was the creator showrunner. He was the guy. So he ran the writer's room, and he wanted to make sure that the writing was so good that like, you know what, guys, I'm going to keep asking that question. Another great example would be The Witcher. You've got Henry Cavill. He's such a fanboy, right? That he himself asks questions. A lot of times the actors will be like, okay, you guys know the story better than I do, so I'll just, I'll do what's required of me as the actor. Whereas he comes from the standpoint of, look, I know this material insanely well, right? Because I play these games, I love these games, I read the books, I know the material, right? So I'm going to pose those questions to you. So you guys better have an airtight answer for me when it comes to this script. And to me, that, like, The Witcher is such a fantastic show. That was one of the shows that was on my watch list.
Yeah, I haven't started the next season yet.
Oh my God, it's so good. Like, I love that show. That's a really well-written show.
Well, I watched the first season, and it's hard for me. It's kind of hard to follow because I don't know the games and story of it and everything. So I think
neither did I.
Yeah.
I never played the games. I never. I knew nothing of the story, but I was like, oh, Henry Cavill's in it. He's Superman, so I'm going to watch this.
Yeah, that was,
And so I
yeah.
gave it a chance.
Yeah.
And I thought it was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I like shows like Game of Thrones or like Vikings. Like I like the period piece style shows anyway. And I like I like Henry Cavill's Superman, so I was like, yeah, sure, same thing. I might as well at least watch it and then see where it goes. But yeah, no, it's it's on my list. I haven't watched it yet either. The next
I think
season.
you'll like it. I think you'll enjoy it. It is really well done.
Yeah. Okay. So WandaVision, so Captain America, Winter Soldier.
Yep.
What about the character of like John Walker? All the character development and how, because that show we do know for a fact, and I think we already discussed this a little bit. We do know that COVID definitely pulled a lot of issues for that show, like plot wise, story wise, and stuff like that. But what was your kind of like overall take of that and how they kind of finished that one off?
Overall, I enjoyed it. I thought it definitely had strengths and weaknesses. For me, it was interesting. I found myself gravitating more towards some of the supporting characters in that show than the main characters. I think there was more they could have done with Sam and Bucky. I think there were some missed opportunities. I felt it was a little preachy at times, and sort of diminished Sam's position as one of the Avengers. It was like the idea to me, like it just rang so hollow. The idea that Sam, who is literally an Avenger who saved the world, is going to get rejected for a bank loan. That to me, like really, like you're going to reject like one of the people who saved the universe. He's probably like one of the most famous people on the planet. This would be like, I can't even draw an equivalence to this because there isn't one. It's like you think to yourself, like, if Neil Armstrong walked into a bank after landing on the moon and said, I need a loan, and they'd be like, your credits, it's okay, but I'm afraid we can't. Like, really? There's no way. There's just no way that this person gets rejected for a bank loan. And to me, it was like, again, it's one of those things where it's like it happened because they needed it to happen.
Yeah.
Rather than having like a logical explanation for it. But I loved Baron Zemo. I thought Zemo was, for me, the highlight of that show. He was so fantastic. I loved the addition of the Dora Milaje in it. I thought it was unexpected. I didn't expect the Black Panther stuff to be in that show, and the fact that it was, I thought was super cool. And I love the way they portrayed them. So that was nice to see. Let me see. Bucky, I thought I liked where they were going with him. I felt they could have done more. I felt he weakened as well, but just physically weakened, which was interesting because here's a guy who went toe to toe with Captain America and almost won. Right, he was literally beating him to death at the end of Winter Soldier, and he only stops because Captain America gets in his head, essentially, right, and makes him change his mind. And yet in the TV show, he doesn't seem nearly as powerful or as strong. So I don't know if that's if they're retconning it in the sense of they're saying maybe the super serum's wearing off because it's been all these years, or is it because they just need him to be less powerful for the story to occur? I'm not sure, but it just felt like he was kind of like a shadow of the character that he was, the kick-ass character that he was. And there's moments, which that was kind of frustrating for me, is there's these little moments where you get that character, and then they just kind of no, okay, we're going to go back to You're being kind of like a regular Joe.
I would think with something like that, it probably has to do more with the fact that when we're first introduced to him in Winter Soldier, he's like so blank minded. He has no emotions or anything like that. So he has no nothing emotionally holding him back. That's why he's able to go so toe to toe with Cap, right? Where in this, he's because of now what he's experienced through Endgame and all the other like movies and everything that he's been in, and being in Wakanda for however many years without being having his arm or anything like that, and being more human and being so like down to earth and actually trying to become a regular person in society. I think that's the reason why he's not as physically strong. Like, I think his strength is still there. It's just he's more choosing not to use it. I would say because of the fact that he is trying to become more human, so he doesn't want to just straight up be into someone and kill them. He's trying to decommission someone, for example, instead of actually, because the whole idea of that show had to do with the serum and how it affects other people and how it was making, I think her name was Carly or something like that, the main character girl.
Yeah.
And how it was like training, like making her like her ambition of like wanting to bring back the people that blipped and everything like that, making that such a strong thing and going even more extreme is what has happened with any Russian version of this serum has proven. Whereas this, where he has that version, like the Russian version or whatever, where he's trying to he's taking to atone for his sins of killing random people. So it's not the physical strength; it's just he's emotionally not trying to be that evil of a person.
I buy that only so much, I have to say. The reason is because, apples to apples, physical strength wise, he is so much more powerful than Sam is. Sam really just relies more on natural ability than anything else, right? He's got those wings that help him fly, and he's got the shield. But really, he's just a regular guy at the end of the day. He doesn't have any super serum flowing through his veins. He's got nothing that sort of makes him a meta-human or superhuman, or whatever you want to call it, like some of these other heroes. Bucky does. So it just kind of rang hollow for me when they're taking on some of these flag smashers, or later on when they're taking on John Walker even himself, where Bucky's not pulling his punches, yet his hits are having about the same effect as Sam's punches.
Fair enough.
On the bad guys. And that's where it's like, okay, like I buy your argument to a point, but then it comes to this point where it's like, okay, but then when he unleashes, there should be like a stark difference between these two guys. And there isn't. Like, to me, it was like they were about the same level. And it was like, yeah, no, I don't buy that. Like, they shouldn't be. They shouldn't be in that case.
Yeah, no, yeah, it makes sense. That kind of, that's something also that I thought about when first watching Infinity War too, because in Infinity War, when they're fighting in Wakanda, you see Captain America and Black Panther, they're both running like first right out the gate, but you don't see him right next to them as well, because he should be, granted his serum is a little bit weaker than Cap's is technically, but still, say Black Panther and Cap are here, he should still be like here, like still.
Oh,
he should be like 85-90% as strong, as them. But he's not. He's still a super soldier, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, absolutely right. You're exactly right, because they do establish that in Winter Soldier and in Civil War that he's pretty much right on their level, right? Because you've got Black Panther fighting with him, and he's holding his own against him. You've got Captain America fighting against him. He's holding his own against him. So it's like he's right up there with them. So yeah, like to me, it's like they kind of scaled back his level of ability and powers for the sake of the show.
But I think you might be right, because in Black Widow, the Red Guardian has the super soldier serum as well, and he's clearly not as strong when as either Cap or any other soldier has ever been. He has
Yeah.
issues doing basic superhero things of like lifting a car, for example, which should be easy, and he like struggles with it. So I think you have a good point where they throughout time that version it probably just starts to dilute,
Maybe.
and
I
they
mean,
just
that would be an explanation. It's just, but just they never offer it as one,
yeah.
right? It's one of those things where kind of like the Peter Parker thing we were talking about earlier, that with the photo, um, it's like a throwaway line. It's like such a small bit of information that you can give the audience, um, that then just makes you go, oh, I get it, I
Mm-hmm.
understand, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, and the only way you get those is again asking those why questions throughout the process.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, no, makes sense. Oh, cool, cool, cool. Well, I think this was definitely really fun. I liked talking about Spider-Man and everything with you and the
yeah,
little bit of rants. I did want to go into other things, but we can go into stuff a little bit later, into a different thing. But
sure.
that's um, let's just go into a little random question that has nothing to do with Marvel. What was
Okay.
your favorite non-superhero film of 2021?
I gotta think of what are the films that came out this year. Oh my god, like yeah. Um, and I only say that because it was such a weird year, right? Like there was some films I saw in the theaters, but then there was like so much content that I watched online, and it's like I'm just trying to think of like of those which were films that were even made this year and which
Yeah.
were films from the past. Um,
I know
what really stood out?
it's mostly Disney Plus stuff that I'm even thinking of myself too. I'm just like, hmm.
Yeah, yeah. See, like you really
Or
put me on the spot. I'm thinking about some films. Like, what have I watched?
sorry,
Like,
not
I've been
to,
watching so many.
let's change it to content in general then, not just film, or just one of the most things that you've been enjoying from 2021.
Um, just different TV shows. I've been watching a lot of TV shows. There have been movies. Um, and movies, I think I found some to be hit and miss. Like, you know there's some that I was really looking forward to, like Army of the Dead, for example. I was really looking forward to that one because it looked so cool. The concept looked really neat. The execution I found to be kind of like, yeah, it was okay. um, Again, that was mainly due to like there were just a ton of plot holes in that film. I
Hmm.
found its sequel to be a better film. uh, I um, I like the fact that they took the German guy. Oh God, I can't pronounce his name. Um, they made him the star of the sequel, and for me, he was easily the standout of the first film. So I thought that was a really great move on their part. Um, I've watched a lot of like the Netflix originals, like things like the Red Notice and
Hmm.
uh, big movies like this. There was that Ryan Reynolds one that came out early last year.
Free
The
Guy.
similar.
Oh,
There was Free Guy. I enjoyed Free Guy. I'm talking about there was a Netflix film he did, where it's like
oh,
he has
Six
a group of
Underground.
like, yes, yes.
Yeah, that
And
was pretty good too.
they were all kind of like they were good, but it wasn't like
Eh,
anything great. It
yeah.
wasn't like I was like blown away by any of these films.
Hmm.
Like they were just sort of like enjoyable pop bubblegum. I'm trying to honestly think of like a movie that like moved me
So
um,
here
last year.
for
Yeah,
me,
yeah.
it was the one that came to my mind was the uh, limited series. I think it still might be running on Netflix right now. It's uh, what was it called? It was called True Story with Kevin Hart. It was a limited series.
Okay.
It was basically a show. Actually, if you probably like because it does have a lot of. There's not many plot holes in it. It's actually pretty good. It's almost like
Okay.
a fake version of Kevin Hart's life, essentially. It goes
Oh,
into
interesting. Okay.
yeah, it goes into basically like it's a him being like a stand up. He plays uh, a character called the Kid, where he plays like a stand-up comedian, a big movie star, but he's in like superhero movies type thing, like an MCU style character, basically.
Yeah.
And it goes through his life outside of being in the movies, and like he partying and stuff like that. And without going into spoilers and stuff of that show, if you are interested in watching it, there's a death that happens, and it's about what happens afterwards, essentially.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's probably the easiest way I can describe it. It has a lot. It's really good. Like Kevin Hart acts. It's really good. And then what's the guy? I think I could be wrong on this, but I think it's what's the guy who's going to be playing Blade in the next Marvel movie?
Marshall Ali.
Yes, I'm pretty sure he's. Yeah. I think that's the guy who plays Kevin Hart's brother in this show.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure that's him, but I'm pretty sure he's in it. But it's a really strong, really good. It was really. I think it was 10 episodes, 8 or 10 episodes, hour long each. I think 45 to an hour. Yeah, it was actually pretty interesting. One of the ones that caught my eye this year.
I'll have to check that one out because I haven't seen really anything about it. I've heard of it, but I haven't watched it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the other film that sort of stands out big time for me is Dune.
I haven't seen it.
It was amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like as a cinematic sort of feast for the eyes, it's incredible. I watched some making of stuff on it from the CG rendering side of things. The things they did with this film, like, is honestly like things that haven't been done before. But I just found, like, story wise, I thought it was a great story. I think I watched the David Lynch version when I was a kid. And it confused the hell out of me. I didn't understand it. I enjoyed it, but I didn't get it.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Villeneuve version comes across as much clearer as to what's going on, and yet tells a really great story. I really like that one. That was a standout for me.
Mm.
I'm trying to think of more dramatic films that I've seen this past year, and it's like I'm having difficulty. I'm having difficulty thinking of movies that genuinely moved me.
Mm-hmm.
So usually when people ask me, like, what film did you enjoy, it sort of comes into one of two categories for me. One is kind of the spectacle films, the ones that are just really big and loud and fun and enjoyable. It's kind of like getting on a roller coaster and enjoying that ride.
Like Fast 9.
But I haven't seen it.
Yeah, there's no story to it. It's just a yeah.
And that's why I haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It was like, I've seen all the other Fast and Furious films, and then for me they kind of like they should have ended it with Fast 7 with Paul Walker.
Mm-hmm.
That should have been the end, because I watched the one after that and it was just like
Mm-hmm.
And then this one came out and it just seemed even bigger and dumber. And I'm like,
totally
oh my god,
was.
like they're shooting cars into space, and it's just like, what the hell, like this has lost any possible pretense of reality ever.
Oh yeah, I only saw it because my friend wanted me to go see it with him, so I was like, yeah, might as well.
Yeah. Right. So
Do you know what's one that you would like? I think. Well, if you haven't seen it already, you one to watch with your daughters. Mitchell's vs. the Machines on Netflix as well.
I haven't seen that one.
I think that's one you would enjoy to watch with your kids. It's basically about our dependency on technology and stuff like that. And it's really funny animation. It's from the same studio that did Into the Spider-Verse, I do believe. So it's not it's not that animation.
Awesome.
It's not that animation style, but it's a good. They put effort into.
Company.
Yeah. So it's. Look it up on Netflix. It should still be up on there. It's really funny. There's good family dynamic, family brother sister relationship in there. A good funny dad moments. Some overprotective mom moments that are really funny. It's actually, there are some people that I watch on TikTok that do movie reviews and stuff. It was one of
Yeah.
their like favorite movies, like not just animated movies, but movies in general that they watched and
Cool.
stuff. So
I will.
yeah,
I will put it on my list. Yeah, there's
that's
a
one I
couple
think you
of
would like with your kids.
yeah. Having kids, it's like there's a definitely the cartoons and the kids movies we've watched a good share of this year. Like Free Guy is up there for us as a highlight. That was a really
That
good
was
one.
good.
We enjoyed that one. Ron's Gone Wrong. That was a really good one. It had some real heart to it, which was kind of surprising. I didn't expect it, and I found it had some real heart, which was great. What else? We watched a cartoon called The Willoughbys just like a week ago or so, which was just silly fun. It's a funny little cartoon. Some great voice acting from like some Canadian actors, which is really awesome. Like Martin Short is in it, and I think some other Canadian actors. So that's always nice when that happens. Yeah, gosh, I'm trying to think. I'm kind of stumped. I'll be honest. Like I'll probably say Dune and Spider-Man. Those two, I think, for me, they really stand out over a lot of the other films that I've seen this year.
No, fair enough.
If there's anything beyond that, it would be something smaller, more like not a big budget film. It would probably be something more on an indie level, or that sort of mid-budget level, where they really try to go more for character development and story and performance over spectacle. I don't know. Maybe it means I'm getting older because I'm starting. I very much enjoy and appreciate films like that now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Where I'm writing them.
Are you? Well, there's one other movie I do want to see. I guess I can't say this year because it's just the start of the year already. But I'm contemplating. I wanted to get your opinion on Matrix 4. Are you contemplating seeing that? Do you think it's like why bother? Why did they make it? Or kind of like Toy Story 4?
I don't really. I'll be honest. I don't understand why they made it. It's one of those where it's like, yes, I'm curious to see it because I love the Matrix films in general, and I love Keanu Reeves. But at the same time, it's like I'm hearing very mixed bag reactions about this one. Some people are saying it's great. Other people are saying it's a total disappointment. And it's like it makes you kind of scared, right? Because you're like, I don't want to wreck the taste of the other ones if this one's really bad. I guess at the end of the day, you can always treat it kind of like Highlander 2 and pretend it never actually happened. And be like, yeah, it's fine.
Well, that's what people say about the second and third. Everyone only says the first Matrix movie is good and the second one is okay. The third one is trash. So maybe this fourth one will be in the okay category.
Right. Yeah. And there you go. That's one of those things where it sort of begs the question of if that's as good as they could make it, why did they make it? Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, I think the Spider-Man films are a really great example of each successive Spider-Man film is arguably better than the last one. And there's so few sequels that
Spider-Man 3 though.
No, I'm talking about the MCU Spider-Man movies.
Oh, okay.
Like the Tom Holland.
Yeah.
Like for me, the Tom Holland, like this last one's the best one out of the Tom Holland films, I think.
Yeah.
The Tobey Maguire, no, Spider-Man 3 is not the best one. Spider-Man 2 is.
Yeah.
I think Spider-Man 2 is the best one of that lot. But I think Spider-Man 3 they dropped the ball just because of all the studio interference from what I've heard. That was less Sam Raimi's fault than it was just too many fingers in that pie.
Yeah, Sam Raimi didn't want to put Venom in it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, now that we're going back, there we go. Perfect full circle going back to finishing it off with Spider-Man. No, this is great. Let's call it here then, or else we would just be continuing because I just thought of another question I wanted to ask you, but I'll wait till it gets closer till I'll wait till it gets closer till it comes out to ask this question because I will, and then I'll tell you what this question is afterwards. I'm gonna leave.
All right, sounds good.
Is there? I know I'll leave your links, but what want to do? What are you kind of doing and kind of sign yourself off here? Is there anything people can follow you on or anything there?
I think the best places to follow me would be on Facebook. Follow me at Neil Chace Film or at Brimstone Pictures. We're always updating something on either of those to give people sort of a heads up as to where we're going. Yeah, that's I think the best way to follow me.
Nice.
These days.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's where we will call it. This was the first episode of the year. First time being back in months, so hopefully I can stay more consistent. I'm trying to. I make no promises, but that's it for now for M3 Podcast for this episode. Thanks all for listening, and we'll catch you next time.